Good afternoon, Chicago. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and this is Reset. It's Friday. That's when we gather around and we dig into the biggest news stories of the week.
It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says work will continue to protect the state's vulnerable populations from what he says are harmful federal policies.
If you come for me and mine, no, we will fight back.
Powerful pledges to preserve the rights of immigrants here in Chicago as the threat of mass deportations looms with Donald Trump's second White House win.
There's a lot to get to, so I called in a few friends to help me out. Amanda Vinicky is a correspondent for WTTW Chicago Tonight and the host of Chicago Tonight Week in Review. Welcome back, Amanda.
So glad to be here, especially on, such an eventful week. Lots to talk about.
So much to talk about. Tina Sfondeles is here. She's the chief politics reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Good to have you back, Tina.
Thanks.
And rounding out our panel, WBEZ senior government and politics editor, Angela Rozas O'Toole. Hey, Angela.
Hi again, Sasha.
All right. So how did this election night, because this is not any of our first rodeos here, how did this one compare to ones that you've covered in the past in terms of expectations or how quickly or slowly this presidential race was called?
I thought it was very quick. I thought it was very decisive. I think people were expecting it to drag on. I had multiple stories ready to go of if, it dragged out into weeks, if there were legal challenges. That's not what happened. Very different than 2016 as well. Just not what we expected. But I think that's been the entire political year. Like, we could not have anticipated assassination attempts, Joe Biden dropping out, 107-day campaign.
Ooh.
So that's how I walked into this election day saying, you cannot predict what happens.
A total whirlwind over the last, 100 plus days. Amanda, your thoughts?
Yeah, I will echo all of that. I also think that all of the work that journalists did putting out there, it might take a while, is not for naught. We have had so much discussion about voter integrity and the entire process that it's important to spell out what that means, because despite what the president-elect has alluded to, there will be elections in the future. Yes. And so we need to make sure that people understand what that process is, that sometimes it does take time. There are still races that have not been called for Congress and as well as for seats in the Illinois House. While that was not the case for the president, I think that pollsters are probably questioning, where did we go wrong? I am one that doesn't try to take too much interest in polls in the first place, because I'm not sure how great a service that does to listeners, to viewers. They just want to know more about the policy and the news. But it certainly did not fit the super, super close. I don't know that I would call this entirely sweeping, but it was a very easy win for President-elect Trump.
A little easier than we thought, Angela. How many meetings were we in where we had plans for this coming weekend, thinking, okay, Sasha, you got to be on call in case we've got to, go on air because we'll get the results then. It'll take a while, but no.
Yeah, I'm a planner by nature, and I'm not going to say it's just for being a politics editor. I'm always thinking of worst case scenarios in pretty much all aspects of my life. So, because I believe in planning for.
Wow, Angela.
And then we climb back from that. So yes, we had meetings. I was making sure that people understood about it could take days, it could take weeks. There's so much that we learned from the previous two elections of it getting called right away in 2016, and yet so many people being surprised by the outcome. The long delay in 2020. And then for some surprise or disagreement with the outcome. And this time around, I really tried to have this conversation of any of these things are possible. And whatever we think it's going to be, whatever everyone is telling us, we need to plan for everything.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation that night, election night, early on with one of the other political editors from Sun-Times saying, we got to be prepared for this going down tonight, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, yep. Yeah,
exactly. It's like you knew. So we've now had a couple of days to process the presidential election results. It's, of course, the biggest national story. But I want to talk about what this means for us here in Chicago and Illinois. Now, Tina, what is top of mind for you when it comes to Illinois' relationship with a future Trump White House?
I think the threat of the mass deportations comes to mind, and how Chicago and the state might try to protect themselves from that. We are a sanctuary state, So we have some protections, but there is talk about President-elect Trump withholding some police grants for blue states or people who will not be participate or trying to stop this from happening.
Right.
I know that there are discussions about the legal ways to try to stop that as well. I know the governor is ramping up talks with AG Kwame Raoul's office to maybe hire more lawyers, get that ready to go. But there's definitely discussions, but that's top of mind for me.
Yeah.
Because that to me looks like people, ICE or someone knocking on your door and taking you away. That's what it looks like to me. So I think the state and the city needs to be prepared.
So there's a notable takeaway from election night. Yes, Harris won Illinois, but more voters here did vote for Trump this time around than last time. Now in Chicago, Trump got 22% of the city vote, which is up from 12% in 2016. That's jarring. This is according to unofficial returns. In Illinois' statewide vote, Trump snagged about 45% of the vote this year compared to 39% in 2016. So everything went up for Trump here. Did that surprise you, Angela?
No, to be honest. I think something we've seen in this election cycle is I'm seeing people stop talking about the surprise of Donald Trump and Trumpism and his populist sort of approach. There is a sort of reality baked into this is not a blip. This is a change in our two-party, for what it's worth, system.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in Chicago politics. There are arguments being made left and right and all day long about what happened to the Democratic output here, what happened with the Harris campaign. But I think an undeniable truth here is about Trump's hold on conservatism here is not a blip, it's a reality. And I think that was reflected it's getting reflected in a sort of more cross base across Illinois. It is not strange or weird or anything like that to vote for Trump in the city of Chicago, despite how blue it is. It is a more, I would say, in some ways, despite what we've seen in his actions and what has happened, it has become, I'm voting for the policy, not the man, is the conversation.
Right.
People are separating themselves from Trump himself. And so I think we're seeing that I think that's part of what we're seeing in these numbers.
Separating Trump from like the message that he's been sort of pummeling in our brains.
Economy, immigration.
Borders.
Borders.
Closed
There are
borders.
a lot of people in the city of Chicago who are seeing the influx of migration.
Yeah.
And this is what they're thinking. Israel, it's more than just the man.
Yeah. So
I do think that I'll add to that, though, that I think where you have a lot of surprise is because you don't have any Republican members of the Chicago City Council. You don't have Republicans representing the city council or representing the city of Chicago in the state legislature. You have one Republican remaining on the Cook County board. And so there is it's disparate, right? Where you see this increase in support for Trump. I think part of that is because of how districts are drawn. Democrats have control, and so this gets into the gerrymander that you have districts that do not allow for that increase. You also have, because Democrats have such control on power in government in Illinois, they're able to fundraise more, which makes it very difficult for Illinois Republicans to get their message out, to effectively campaign. And you see that through all of those facts that I just stated in terms of who is elected as representation. And I do think that it is what Angela said, but there remains a question, how much of this is sort of Trump effect? How much of the Republican Party is going to continue to be molded via him? And is this a cult of celebrity? Could another candidate accomplish what the president-elect did this past election? Or is he, despite agreement on certainly in corners of Illinois and in Chicago on the message, is it also a message that he needs to be the one making in order for people to be excited about enough about it to come out and vote or to believe in it?
So as for Harris, there's a lot of discussion about where she made gains and losses among voters. Black voters chose Harris in similar numbers as they did Joe Biden back in 2020, while white voters held steady in their support for Trump. And I got to be honest, there are a lot of eyes on how white women voted, choosing Trump over a female president. Were any of you surprised there at all? And I'm curious what conversations you're hearing in your circles. Amanda, you first.
The vice president did not make a huge issue in her own campaign about its historic abilities in terms of her being potentially the first woman, again, to break that, glass ceiling, or the first Black woman to also have the opportunity to serve as president. So I don't know how much that was front and center for many voters. There's all of this talk about kitchen table issues. If you have the opportunity to cast a vote on, am I going to be able to, pay my mortgage, feed my family? I think for some voters that comes before any thought to, okay, she's a woman and that might resonate with me. That comes despite, of course, for some voters, reproductive rights are the main issue. There are certainly women who embrace that message. You also saw, I believe, more college-educated women, particularly white women, going toward Harris. But for those are
very much on that.
For many people, it's a matter of class. It's a matter of dollars and cents, and whether it is true that Trump's agenda is going to be able to help people economically. That is definitely what he promised, and that certainly resonated.
What do you think, Tina?
I was not surprised to see the demographics and the gender issue. President Obama was campaigning, telling Black men that they need to step up and support a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that was coming. They were warned about the Latino vote. These were all issues that they knew she could potentially face. I'm not surprised. I did just have a discussion with someone in politics who's a Democrat who was telling me that he's kind of scared to walk around and think that he's a white man. People around him thinking that he was a Trump supporter just because he's a white man. There's there's the people I was on a train yesterday where a migrant woman was asking for money with her child in her backpack, and a guy was really rude to her. And I was thinking, is this a Trump supporter? It's a white man,
right?
So I think there's that
we
perception
might start
going
having
on
these perceptions
right now.
now, right?
Yes,
yeah. Angela, what comes to mind for you?
I'm thinking about what Amanda is talking about, kitchen table, and whether or not Trump's policies can really fix a financial future. And I think you're just hitting on something. When in the circles that I've heard who support him, they put aside character flaw. They put aside all of the things he's been accused of being a misogynist, a racist, a xenophobe, all those things, and they talk about money, and they talk about jobs, and they talk about all of that, and that they're saying that Democrats don't understand it. And this is also coming from some moderates, some independents, that at the end of the day, they're going to vote
with their pocketbooks.
The Democratic Party is the incumbent party. And if people are not happy with where the country is, it doesn't matter who's running in some ways. And it matters. It does, of course, right? But at the end of the day, Harris had a huge hill to climb in 107 days of absolute, a countrywide issue with how unpopular Biden was and how factual or not about the economy, it's how people felt.
Yeah.
And something that I've been sort of circling back to as well is when you have a candidate, and we've seen this in Illinois as well with our state, where you have candidates constantly saying things are terrible. This country, this state, this government is a mess. How much that resonates. So certainly not belittling how anybody feels and looking at their checkbooks, because I think this economic message is certainly one that has resonated. But it's greater than that, and I wonder how much that sticks around. There has been of course, an increase in tenor that got a lot of attention when former President Trump was attempted twice to be assassinated. So that got a lot of talk in terms of just the rhetoric, but I also wonder what effect the rhetoric has on people's sentiment and belief in government, and how much that continues to be propelled, and how much that's going to be used even as you're seeing President Trump take the White House, because he continues to project himself as an outsider. That's something, again, not singular to him. You see a lot of politicians hold office and still cast themselves as the outsider, and what that means for the public and their belief in government to fix any of these matters.
Let's dig more into what some of our local folks are thinking here. So Illinois leaders, they didn't hold back when it comes to issuing strong words in response to President Trump's election. This is Governor J.B. Pritzker in a news conference yesterday.
To anyone who intends to come take away the freedom and opportunity and dignity of Illinoisans, I would remind you that a happy warrior is still a warrior. You come for my people. You come through me.
Now, Pritzker also pledged to protect vulnerable communities in Illinois from a Trump agenda. Here he is again.
Over the years ahead, we'll do more than just protect against the possible reversion to an agenda that threatens to take us backward. We will continue to advance a positive, productive, and inclusive agenda of our own, one that brings opportunity to Illinois and helps uplift the nation as a whole.
So, Tina, what could that protection from the state government look like in practice? What's the latest that we're hearing from Pritzker?
He didn't say too much. So Amanda and I cover the governor religiously. I would say he was very somber, sad, emotional. There were some pauses. He was talking about being disappointed for his children that there's not a female president and how much longer the world or the country will have to wait for that. But I will say we did ask for some specifics and we didn't get very much. I did do a couple of additional interviews yesterday and got a little bit more.
Okay.
That they are looking into further environmental protections, anything that's regarding the Chevron ruling, the Supreme Court ruling from June last year that would affect, it's a lot of climate change, air pollution type of thing. So making sure that there are things on the books to protect from anything that might happen with that.
Yeah.
Also, there already are some protections for women traveling to Illinois who are getting abortions, but they're looking more into that as well. And they're as I said earlier, they're trying to ramp up the legal staff and legal resources because there will be legal rulings against the Trump administration 100%.
You know, I saw somebody describe this. I believe it was the Capital Facts newsletter called it Trump proofing, which resonated. I have a young baby, and so we've been doing a lot of baby proofing, right? And you have to sort of anticipate what she's going to do, what she doesn't know is dangerous, doesn't really care, frankly, whether it is. That's not top of mind. And we need to anticipate if she's going to try things that I would never imagine her, like she's really into digging into the recycling right now and, you know, took a cap off the milk carton, which is bad for her because she should swallow it. It's that sort of thing where I think you don't know. So there is a lot of research, a lot of smart minds thinking about in Democratic-led states. So you see California has called a special session to deal with this. Illinois has not done so, but legislators will be there starting Tuesday. So there are these initial discussions, but I just don't know how much you can fully anticipate. Right. And further, there could be acts like, you know, if the Comstock Act is evoked, if you're not going to be able to send via mail medication abortion, there's little that Illinois could do about that. That is federal.
Yeah. Well, switching over to Chicago here, Mayor Brandon Johnson, he also reacted strongly. He said, quote, "Chicagoans can be assured that they have a mayor who will not bend, who will not break when it comes to protecting our city, our values, and our neighbors. When it comes to fighting back against any hate, we will not flinch." I'm looking at you, Angela. Do you think that Johnson is prepared to go up against the White House?
He's got a lot to face here. And when you're thinking about Chicago, you mentioned it, Tina, we're facing potential mass deportations. This is a sanctuary city.
Is this an opportunity maybe for Johnson and Pritzker to
I was
align?
about to say, you stole it. That was my line. It was basically, Johnson and Pritzker have not necessarily been aligned, particularly on this issue. This may be a place where they have a lot more in common in terms of coming up against a Republican president and his policies. I'm also thinking about, of course, we're thinking about money, right?
Yeah.
The city of Chicago is facing massive budget hole. State is too. That's something they also have in common. And the idea that they can turn to the federal government for expansion of money, or even have, they've got concerns about money that's already been promised to them. We're looking at the O'Hare expansion, CTA Red Line expansion, all money that's coming in phases. And to Amanda's point, we don't know what we don't know about what President-elect Trump will try to do.
Yeah. So staying on the subject of Democrats in Illinois, so Dems were able to hold on to veto-proof majorities in the state House and Senate, even as Republicans have nearly swept across the country. Democrats did, however, lose a couple of seats. What happened, Amanda?
Well, so we still have, I believe, 3 races that are undecided as yet. But as close as they are, what it really looks like is things are going to stay stable in Illinois. That, like, you might have literally the same exact numbers and ratios of Democrats to Republican in January as you do now, which is, by the way, 2-1 Democrats outnumbering Republicans. So that appears to be the case. You have Democrats claiming victory there, that they held on, Republicans claiming claiming victory that they held on in frustrations, I think, in both parties, however, that they didn't do better. Democrats, of course, as I alluded to earlier, having vast more money, I believe like 3 times as much to spend.
Right.
And so that's what Republicans are up against. Conservatives believe that the numbers, and as you spoke to earlier, the increase in support for President Trump in Chicago as well as statewide, that Republicans should be doing even better in Illinois.
Yeah. So, Tina, is this a sign then for Illinois Republicans that they can chip away at the sides and slowly build their power here?
I think it's definitely starting a discussion of, do you need more Republican officials running in Chicago and in the state, and to not be in a super minority? But as Amanda said, the funds are not there. They don't have, you have a Ken Griffin in Florida. You got Dick Uihlein still around, but they need something like that or a different structure to try to fund these people.
All right. Before we wrap here for this section of the recap, I want to touch on this here, Tina. Protests. I mean, they're already planned at Trump's inauguration in January. Tens of thousands of people are expected to, of course, take part in the March on Washington in January. Chicago has wasted no time either. Wednesday, after Trump was declared president-elect officially, hundreds of activists here hit the streets downtown to protest the two-party system. Tell us more.
This was planned before the election. Did not matter who won. So they
were
going to
hit the streets anyway.
Yep, they said both candidates believe in genocide. That's the accusation. So this is just them trying to make sure that their voices are heard. This was a pro-Palestinian group. There's about 300 people. This is an issue that will be a huge issue for President Trump in January. Also, the Ukraine war. So he keeps saying that there were no wars during his first term, and that, but he's also kind of empowering Israel to do what they want to do. So I think these people will continue to raise their voice.
We'll take a pause here. There's a ton more news to get to, and the panel's not going anywhere. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Now, before the break, we dug into the big story of the week, the election. We talked about how the results will impact us here in Chicago and Illinois. But there was other news in our area this week.
On Monday night, our department and our city lost a hero when Officer Enrique Martinez was shot and killed protecting the city of Chicago.
A person of interest has been taken into custody in connection with a fatal shooting at Navy Pier this week that killed 2 men.
Budget hearings now underway at City Hall, and the Johnson administration defending the mayor's proposals, including a proposed $300 million property tax increase.
Fidel Marquez is one of the government's star witnesses. He pleaded guilty to participating in a conspiracy to bribe Madigan.
Our panel today, Amanda Vinicky, who is a correspondent for WTTW's Chicago Tonight and host of Chicago Tonight Week in Review. Tina Sfondeles, the chief politics reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Angela Rozas O'Toole, who's WBEZ's senior politics editor. Now, Amanda, this week, a Chicago police officer was shot and killed. This was in the line of duty. I want you to tell us more about Officer Enrique Martinez and what happened.
So this is sad. Of course, he was only 26 years old,
Very
I believe,
young.
coming upon his 3rd year with the department. He and his partner trying to make a stop in Chatham. The passenger in the vehicle allegedly opened fire on Martinez and also killing who was apparently his friend, the driver of this car. Martinez is from the West Lawn neighborhood and read some really just heartbreaking stories about how he, trained to be on the force. And this couples with reporting, actually believed by the Sun-Times, in terms of the number of new recruits, the high numbers of people as the CPD is looking to bring folks in that are killed in the line of duty, as was the case here, or otherwise either via suicide or being let go because of getting into trouble with the law themselves. So this, again, puts greater eyes, of course, on the CPD. You heard there from the Superintendent Snelling talking about the hero that this police officer was, and standing up for officers, never knowing what they are going to encounter, as apparently was this very situation.
Yeah.
It happened, but Martinez had really no chance before he was fired on by what was essentially a gun turned into a machine gun.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Several other young officers, I want to just make note, have been killed in the line of duty in recent years. We saw Luis Huesca, Ariana Preston, Andres Vasquez Lasso, and Ella French. Darren McMillan was charged with first-degree murder here in the death of Officer Martinez, among other charges. What else do we know about McMillan?
He did have a felony record, and so I think this brings into questions some of why he was not detained, although there have not been loud questions there. This appears to be related to felony drug charges, but I believe also as part of his record there was a prior gun charge as well. So he was, again, quite young. I believe, like you said, 23.
23.
And so that's what we know at this point. We don't know. There was another individual that was questioned, believed to be perhaps in the car, but let go, did not apparently have anything to do with the shooting.
Yeah, McMillan
and another
was,
officer also harmed in this incident.
Absolutely, yeah. And McMillan was on electronic monitoring.
And cut off the
Will
monitor with a saw, apparently. Went into a woman's home, which had to have been terrifying. No incidents there.
Wow. So let's hear again from Superintendent Larry Snelling. Now, he said that the handgun used in the shooting, as you alluded to, Amanda, it had a magazine extension, also known as a switch, and it allowed it to fire automatically. So this is Snelling at a news conference Wednesday when the charges were announced.
Our officers were doing every single thing that they could to stop this from escalating into something else. And as a result of the weapon that this individual had, our officers were outgunned.
We've talked about these switches before on this program, Amanda, but I mean, they play a big role in the gun violence here in Chicago, don't they?
They certainly do. And they, again, as you heard Snelling say, it puts officers in a situation where they themselves do not have the weapons to be able to fight back. This, of course, comes as a conversation where you have people questioning the actions of police officers in general and whether they should be armed. But on the police advocate side, they're saying, look at what they are up against. It's not just in Chicago or in Illinois. This is something that even states that I think are typically thought of as more open to guns or less control of them are combating as well. Looking at states like Texas, seeing a proliferation of switches and trying to look at that. I think that there are questions, however. I mean, these are banned. Illinois has, at least for now, because it is going through the courts, a ban on so-called assault weapons as well as devices such as this. But they are fairly easy to get a hold of and can easily turn a regular gun into, again, one that you would sort of imagine on the movies where
10 times
G.I.
more
Joe
powerful,
style.
for sure. I want to turn to another fatal shooting this week. This was close to home for us here at WBEZ and the Chicago Sun-Times. On Tuesday, we got a shelter-in-place message here at our Navy Pier offices. I was in the building. Angela, I know that you were on your way here for, coincidentally, election coverage. You were told not to come to the pier. So fill us in on the details of the shooting that occurred.
Yeah, it was about midday, as you mentioned on Tuesday, an alert that there was a shooting over near the loading docks near our offices, a little bit of ways close to the hotel that's here on Navy Pier. Navy Pier being the #1 tourist attraction,
right?
In Illinois, I believe it does not happen often. 2 people were killed. Workers at Lamont Johnson and Peter Jennings. They're both employees of the hospitality group Levy here on the pier. In the follow-up reporting from the Sun-Times, talked to family members of both. They described them as family men. One of the men took care of their family. They both had children. It's just tragic, honestly. And we've come to understand that Chicago police have taken a person of interest in custody. They're saying this was a disgruntled employee who
ex-employee.
Disgruntled employee who had been fired earlier this month and allegedly committed the shooting. So it's
wow.
Yeah, it's just tragic. And again, a reminder, as Amanda was saying, it's sort of the gun violence in the city of Chicago.
Broad daylight at a tourist attraction.
Well, and I guess this circles back to our earlier conversation because you did have outgoing State's Attorney Kim Foxx as well as Superintendent Snelling saying that this is an issue that is outside of their power that needs to be dealt with through action on the federal level that will at least reduce the number of guns that are on the streets in Chicago. That is something that I think we can anticipate not happening, of course, under a Trump administration, just given his stances on gun control. So that will, I think, those looking for a quick solution are not going to meet that. And there are questions, as I briefly mentioned. Illinois does have this ban on so-called assault weapons. Those who own them say that they take umbrage with that terminology. But that is in place for now. One of the many consequences as well of a Trump administration will continue to be control and appointments on the courts, including the Supreme Court. The assault weapons case is one that very well could reach the Supreme Court of the United States, and Illinois may not have that on the books any longer. We, of course, can't predict how justices will rule, but...
Well, sticking with you, Amanda, in other news, we saw 2 Jewish students at DePaul punched on Wednesday. This is while they were expressing support for Israel. It's still being investigated, but what do we know at this point?
To my knowledge, nobody has been taken into custody for this. It is being investigated as a hate crime. These are 2 individuals that wore masks during the apparent attack. And from what I have read, these 2 individuals expressing support for Israel were outside the Hillel Center, which is a meeting place for Jewish students on college campuses, and had been doing this on a relatively common basis. So that is where, again, is being attacked as a hate crime, presumably because the alleged attackers knew who they were going after and why. And so it continues to spur calls of anti-Semitism. As Tina talked about earlier, there are certainly those who are very frustrated with the lack of involvement by the U.S. government to put a stop to a war that is leading to mass killings of Palestinians. So this is, I think, despite it being, half the world away, something that continues to hit home in Chicago.
If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and you're listening to our weekly news recap with Amanda Vinicky, who's a correspondent for WTTW's Chicago Tonight, Tina Sfondeles, who's chief politics reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, and WBEZ senior politics editor Angela Rozas O'Toole. So, Tina, for weeks, jurors in the federal corruption trial of former House Speaker Michael Madigan, they've been hearing tape and phone calls and conversations. This week, there was a call that really stood out, though. So I want you to talk about what jurors heard in this recorded call between a ComEd consultant and Madigan's son.
Yes. So first of all, it's Michael McLean, who is the ComEd consultant who was convicted last year. And so the call is with Michael Madigan's son, Andrew, and that is kind of shocking for anyone who's covered Madigan because we've heard of his son, but we don't, the family is very private. So now you actually have his voice in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And the call is... There's some swearing in here, but I'm not going to say it. But McLean telling Andrew Madigan, that's what happens when you're in this game. He's talking about a People's Gas executive complaining about McLean trying to get a job for a Madigan ally. And the way he talks about it is like, I don't get it. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. It just kind of exemplifies how McLean operated, that he just felt like this is what you're supposed to be doing. So it was a bad look, I would say. A bad look.
Well, we do have a clip from this call. I think we've also taken out the swear words. You're going to hear Madigan's co-defendant, Michael McLean, as Tina just explained, telling Andrew Madigan about efforts to get a friend hired at People's Gas and that the utility was feeling pressured by that ask from Madigan's orbit.
I just love these people that they're in a regulatory body, right? And they're offended if people ask for favors. Hello?
Yeah, I get it.
Angela.
All right.
How significant is this?
I mean,
we've been hearing a lot of tape in this trial,
yes.
But how significant is this, and how does it compare to the other stuff that we've heard?
Dave McKinney has been covering this trial along with John Seidel from the Sun-Times, and when Dave played this tape for me the other night, editing, I nearly fell out my chair. I got to tell you, and to hear the rest of the tape, Michael, the government is trying to say that the pressure from Madigan to bring in people for no-work jobs, the pressure on public utilities to have to fulfill these costs. And here is this tape with McLean bemused, incredulous even, he can't believe that People's Gas isn't up to speed with what happens here. That's like some verbiage in here. This is the way it goes.
Wow.
This is the way it goes. And he can't believe that these guys aren't up to the task. I would call this some of the most damning tape because of the way it plays out that we have heard from both this trial and the ComEd trial. So much of the tape that we've heard so far has been, it's a bit cloak and dagger. It's hard to kind of understand. You got to connect a whole bunch of dots. This one is pretty plain in terms of McClain expected, according to this tape, he expected them to get in line. He uses the words. He goes on to say, he says, I don't understand why they can't just obey. He uses the word obey.
Wow.
So it's really some of the most damning, and it's funny and it's not funny because it's accused political corruption. I mean, I got to tell you about one other piece of tape. I would put it up in the top 2 pieces of tape of this trial.
Yeah.
The other one being when Michael Madigan borrowed Michael McClain's phone to call his own wife and ask her what she wanted for dinner. There's some amazing tape of Madigan. We call this the soup tape because he calls his wife when he's out to dinner and he's reading through like the different kinds of soups and she's like, yes, okay, honey, and he's like describing the soup.
That's
It's
a pretty
the
good
soup
Madigan
Is that how she
impression.
sounds?
Yeah.
It's exactly how she sounds. Why does that matter? That's, again, the cloak and dagger of Michael Madigan and this massively important person who never carried his own phone.
Yeah.
This was a part of the lore, and we see it play out. So those 2 pieces of
Interesting.
tape go into the documentary.
Oh my gosh. Well,
about
sum it up
Michael
for us,
Madigan.
Sina. What is next in this trial?
According to John Seidel, federal courts reporter and work bestie, he says the good stuff is coming later.
All right. Well, thank you, John.
And it's going to carry on for a long time,
yes.
too.
So this
I
is
think
what we learned that day of the Andrew Madigan tape is that the judge said it's likely to stretch into January. It was supposed to be 11 weeks. And so that is a very, very long trial. The problem here, as Angela said, that was a very good tape for the prosecutors to play for jurors, but then it was followed by 4 hours of emails. So you get this like little burst of excitement, and then you
Right.
have a lot of paper, and they're building and building and building this case. We still have not seen Danny Solis. We've not seen any sort of connections to Madigan's law firm. There's supposed to be some sort of Governor Pritzker's office person potentially testifying. So there's a lot more that is coming
in
up.
other words, it ain't soup yet.
Exactly, Amanda.
Oh, God.
We're not
Good
even.
one.
All right,
we're
Amanda.
not even in the restaurant yet. We're all in the waiting room.
We got to talk the budget, Amanda. 29 aldermen have banded together for a special meeting to strike down Mayor Johnson's proposed property tax hike. What's going on?
Well, so from the moment that this was introduced, it was clear that he was going to get some massive pushback from alderpersons. I think in particular because he has promised that he wants to go forward, continuing a practice that was first implemented under the Lightfoot administration of paying additional money into the beleaguered pension systems, which is not particularly something that gets any member of the city council or resident of Chicago pumped, right? I mean, the Johnson defense of this is that he does not want to leave, he says, the future of Chicago in the same state as he is dealing with now. In making this extra payment could save nearly $4 billion down the road.
Yeah.
And so that is going to be a continued argument that we're going to have to see Johnson, who has, let's be honest, taken some hits recently and therefore might not have all of the bargaining power that typically a strong mayor would have in Chicago's past. So we will see how this plays out. There's a special meeting on Wednesday, and yet the 26 alder people, while that is a majority from I'm not a city council, rules expert, but from my understanding, you need a supermajority. So you'll need 34 members of the city council to be able to take that action. And so we don't know yet.
Right.
26, of course, less than 34.
So, Angela, before this, the
Big
city's big math. Before this, though, Angela, the city's chief financial officer, Jill Jaworski, told members of the council's Budget and Government Operations Committee that the mayor's budget plan, quote, prioritizes the city's long-term fiscal stability. What are the city's pension obligations?
What are we talking about here? Pensions. I mean, Amanda touched on it. We are staring down just a long road of underfunded pensions. The city of Chicago, and when we're talking about pension, we're talking about city workers who, let's say, have been promised lifelong pensions. So this is a system in the city of Chicago that is built on years and years and years of promises and debt. So we are $37 billion owed to the city's 4 pension funds, and that covers police officers, firefighters, municipal workers. These funds, we've been in the hole for so long that so many previous mayors were kicking it down the road, making the problem long time bigger problems, because if you didn't fulfill your payments, then it put you in a position of being underrated by companies to say, when you go to borrow money to fix your holes, you have to pay a lot more money. So when she's talking about this long-term money, we're talking about if you don't fix your pension problem now, you're going to just end up kicking the can and making it that much worse for the city of Chicago and its workers as you go on down. We are talking about a 30-year plan here to fix the pension problem. That's how long it's going to take to fix this problem, unless, and this has been tried and discussed and tried, you at some point went to a constitutional change to try to change what these city workers are owed. But that is so hard to near impossible to ever do. So I don't know how to fix it. No, nobody knows how to fix it.
They don't know either.
This is you're just like you're paying that debt year after year and billions to come.
Let's take a quick pause. Plenty more news where that came from with our panel. They're sticking around. We hope you will too. And we're back now with more of Reset's weekly news recap. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. Let's jump back into the top stories of the week with Amanda Vinicky of WTTW, Tina Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, and WBEZ's Angela Rozas O'Toole. Now, prohibition is finally over for a small pocket of Lincoln Square. If you think I'm a century late, you're wrong. What is going on here, Amanda?
You're definitely not wrong. Yeah, this is a ban that has been in place since 1907, but a lot of people probably didn't know it because this is sort of a area of Ravenswood, Lincoln Square, North Center, and it's a ancient area, really. It's a portion of a ward in a precinct. So people wouldn't know because you can go to restaurants just across the street. In fact, the restaurant owners, because it has been BYOB, say that they regularly send their customers to a nearby grocery store to buy tequila that can be mixed in with their own virgin homemade mix that they have at the restaurant.
So voters there, they overwhelmly repealed a ban on alcohol sales that dates back
more
than 100 years ago.
More than a century, and it was fairly resounding. And this is to the credit and really hard work, I guess, of the restaurant owners who did not themselves know that they were subject to a ban of selling liquor that had been in place for so long. Now that is going to change thanks to voters, again, in this really small slice of the northwest side of Chicago.
Angela's over there trying so hard not to laugh.
It's just so Chicago. You're just like...
Did you think I was giving breaking news? Prohibition is finally over.
It's just so Chicago to just like you're on one block and you can have all the tequila and you go across the street, and because of a ban from 1907 that nobody thought to overturn until this poor store owner, this restaurant owner is just like, what? I can't, what? And then has to get this repealed. So I love this story because I love the grit and determination of this one restaurant owner, like making this happen. And I love how little sometimes we know about places, across the street.
Yeah. Have you heard of this?
It happened pretty quickly too. Like I'm also impressed with this owner of the restaurant that Amanda can pronounce.
Soshi-Milko. The food looks real good. Haven't tried it yet, but it looks delicious.
No, I lived in Lincoln Square. Did not know this existed.
Oh,
so I think it's really cool. I love that she saved the block.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so far this hour, we have talked about the election. We talked local politics. We talked a lot more. I want to get into a little holiday cheer before I say goodbye to you folks. The ice skating ribbon at Maggie Daly Park, it's taking reservations.
You say that like somebody who's good at skating.
Yay! We can start skating as early as November 15th.
You can start falling as early as November 15th.
Are you not a fan of the famous skating
ribbon?
ribbon?
It's great. I think it's cool to watch, but yeah, I cannot skate. So.
Oh, the ribbon is amazing.
I can fake skate.
I've taken my kids there, and I got to tell you, like, It is one long ribbon if you don't know how to skate.
It is. To my point.
Going and going.
It also has a slight incline if you've never been there before.
Oh, no.
And I can tell you the penguins that you can rent don't really make much of a difference. Although it is a delightful experience. I'm excited about the idea of fall, turning into winter, frankly, and bringing back the spirit in the holiday season and getting outside and, cocoa and all those kinds of things.
And the Kindle market.
Always here for cocoa.
I went there once when they happened to be closed that day. This was like 2 winters ago, and I've just been, staying away ever since. So I'll try again this season. I'll try again. But no, I can fake skate. Like I can skate-ish.
Because you're Canadian.
Because I'm Canadian.
Is that part of it?
Yes.
You kind of got to know how to ice skate.
Yes. So if skating isn't your vibe, and Tina, because you have said nothing, I'm sensing that that's you.
Yes, this is true.
There's another option for people who want to escape the cold weather. Have you heard about the sauna on the beach?
I have not heard about the sauna on the beach.
Listen, stay with me. There's a Chicago company offering private sauna sessions. This is on North Avenue Beach. I mean, would you do that?
Cool.
Would you do that?
I don't think so.
Yes, except for it's only Friday mornings.
Tina's
when
like, that's
I
great,
gotta
but no.
work. But
I want to watch Hallmark movies. I want to go to the Chris Kindle Market. I want a Tom and Jerry's from Miller's.
Heck yeah.
I want to go to the Walnut Room with Amanda's cute baby. So
Been
there's
there,
like a
done
list.
that already. We are already.
We already did that.
in
We did that
holiday
last
spirit.
weekend, by the way.
I don't know. You've got to see a picture of this place. It is a tiny little hut. I saw it in.
It looks real cool.
It
Real warm, actually.
It looks cool. I don't know if I'm with Tina.
I wasn't going in that direction. I was going to say it looks like a tiny prison, but but if it's warm, then I applaud. Again, I'm going to shout out Chicago and just the ingenuity. You thought we were done when we were putting up those things so you could eat outside. You thought we were done when we were throwing rafts in the water and putting, you can hire one of those. No, we're not done. We're going to put a sauna on a beach that you can rent for 20 minutes.
But wait, there's more. So Tina, what is your favorite Christmas holiday activity? You talked about the Chris Kindle Market. Is that it?
Yeah, I think I like to go to eat and drink at restaurants that have beautiful decorations and you're feeling in the spirit and you're wearing stupid Christmas clothing with your friends.
Yes.
Just that's what I need in my life.
Christmas sweaters. Amanda?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've got many. I've got some I think are cute that others might find ugly. Some I agree are ugly.
We just haven't been able to tell you yet.
Anything and everything holiday. My biggest beef with the holidays is that people take it all down as soon as Christmas is over, and January is when I really need the joy. So
are you one of those that keep your lights up till February or March?
I keep up my tree for certainly at least parts of January.
Yes.
I can confirm that it's longer than that for her.
In my defense, that was during the pandemic when
it was
really
maybe April.
Needed some.
I look at you differently now, Amanda.
I need it.
Angela and I are just looking at you with such
love
shame.
it. I love it.
Fire
I love
hazard
it.
is all.
I mean, fig tree.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's it for the weekly news recap with Amanda Vinicky of WTTW, Tina Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, and WBEZ's Angela Rosa O'Toole. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Happy early holidays.
Yeah. And that's it for Reset. The show is produced by Maha Ahmed, Micah Yasin, Linnea Dominic, Ari Mejia, Andre Guthman, and Jules Yeager. Dan Tucker is our executive producer. Ethan Schwab and Haley Bloomquist were our engineers this week. Now, Monday on the show, we're going to head to Sturtevant, Wisconsin. Yep, that's right. Only about 10 miles north of the Illinois-Wisconsin state line. We're going to check out the Pritzker Military Museum and Library. It's very cool. Our architecture expert, Dennis Rodkin, is going to show off the structure's very bold design elements. These are by late Chicago architect Helmut Jahn. You don't want to miss our regular series on the program called What's That Building? I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend yourselves, and we'll meet again very soon.